Hey, everybody, and welcome to the statement of purpose versus the personal statement. How are they similar? How are they different? Welcome to everyone. We're going to hang out here just for a moment because I can see those participant numbers going up pretty rapidly, and we don't want to get started without giving people a chance to attend. So while you're waiting, we'd love to hear from you in chat. Just give us a shout out, say hey, where you're joining us from, all that stuff. I love to see how many near and far places our students are situated in. I'm going to kick us off. Hello from me in the chat. I'm currently in Northern California. All right. Emily is joining us from Texas, Indiana, Minnesota. Love it. We have a Canadian, or at least someone in Canada. Oh my goodness, got some Bay Area people, more Canada. Awesome, another person in NorCal, like I am. Oh my goodness, you guys are coming from all over. That is amazing.
All sorts of different time zones here.
Yeah, I know. And I'm really, that's not lost on us. We appreciate you joining if you are joining at a time of the day that most people are sleeping or winding down. My name is Lene. I'm on the content team here as well as the admissions team. I've been in Magoosh for about 3 years. And prior to Magoosh, I have about 15 years in admissions in some capacity. A lot of that's test prep, but then a lot of it is also helping people navigate that transitional space, whether it be from undergrad to grad or from your career back to school. I've spent a lot of time helping people navigate that and all of the steps that it takes. I'm also not alone today. I have a buddy who's going to help me, especially with all your great questions. I'm going to let her introduce herself to you guys.
Hi guys, I am Kelsey Krausen. I am currently in Logan, Utah. I just joined the Magoosh team this summer and I'm really excited to be a part of this admissions round. It's helpful because I just went through the admissions process. I'm currently getting my PhD in psychology, so I'm pretty excited to get that started going as well. And I'm actually an alumni for Magoosh. I used a lot of products this time around when I was going through in my admissions. So I am here to help you kind of navigate that experience as well as what it was like to go through the whole Magoosh stuff. So happy to be here and happy to help out with the chat for you guys today.
So just to check in and make sure, I'm assuming you guys can see us and hear us, but on your screens, do you see that great big purple background statement of purpose and personal statement with the date? Does everyone see that? Just give me a yes, no. Awesome. All right, then we are ready to proceed. We're going to start with just a little bit of housekeeping. Today's session will be recorded for those who are not able to attend. So hello to everyone who's watching this via the recording, or for anyone who'd like to review what we cover later. We will have quite a few breaks for Q&A throughout, and we'll also have a bit of time at the end. And then, of course, we welcome any and all questions. We're excited to hear from you. If we don't get to your question, you can email us anytime at help@magoosh.com. So, the statement of purpose and personal statement, terms that are thrown around quite often, but what exactly is the difference? I'm going to break that down for you on this next slide. So the statement of purpose versus the personal statement. A statement of purpose focuses on what? So that's the key word for the statement of purpose. What you want to do in graduate school, and you're going to communicate that through details like academic background, your strengths, anything that you've accomplished that shows that, that connects to sort of that big what that you want to do. It might be research interests in the past, it might be future research interests, it could be a combination of both of those. Motivation and experience that demonstrates fit for the program. That one's really important because you obviously need to show that that program is best suited to help you get where you want to go, particularly in whatever it is that your researchers focus on. Typically about 2 pages in length, so it's a little bit longer. And the language of the statement of purpose tends to be a bit more formal, a bit more direct, a bit more, here are the details that support my what. And with that, it doesn't necessarily, not always, but it doesn't always allow room for more of a narrative approach or a personal approach. So that's the statement of purpose. in a nutshell, but obviously there are definitely variations out there. The other one, a personal statement, that focuses on the why you're pursuing graduate study, and you'll share why you're pursuing graduate study through your personal motivations or inspirations to the things that really have gotten you excited about this field, how the interest in the field developed, if there's a key moment that you want to share, you think that is essential to the story, relevant personal academic experiences or challenges. It's typically 1 to 1.5 pages. And of course, this all depends, even what I just said about the 2 pages for the statement of purpose, that all depends on the directions you're given and the word count that you are assigned to, that assigned to your essays. Language for personal statements can be less formal, but it also just tends to be less formal because you're sharing your own personal narrative and you're focusing on the why. And I'd love to hear from Kelsey here because I know that she has not that long ago written one of these. And I would love to hear whether she feels it sort of aligns with what she experienced.
Yeah, absolutely. So I applied to about 6 different programs, and I had some that were asking for personal statements and some asking for statements of purpose. Again, it kind of depended on the program that I was applying to. So make sure you check to make sure which one you actually need to write for each program. I also had some that were limited to about 500 words and some that were open to about 6 pages. And so you really have to make sure you're looking at those requirements. My SOPs were always focused more on my research interest. My personal statements were more focused on my journey on how I got to where I was applying for my program.
Awesome. So that's a perfect segue into the caveat that we're going to share next, which is some schools ask for a personal statement. Some schools ask for a statement of purpose. Some ask for both. So that might be something that you're experiencing. Some might ask for an essay that seems like a hybrid of the two. That can be fairly common, and that's okay. All of those things are at the whims of the programs you're applying to. So however they want it, in whatever way they want to hear from you, you just want to try to deliver on what they've asked. Some will even ask for written essays, especially if you're applying to schools in the UK. Others, although this is pretty rare, but I have seen that, will use the term SOP and personal statement interchangeably, even though they're referring to the same prompt. So the thing they have in common is what you really want to focus on, and that is the purpose of these essays. So what purpose does an SOP or personal statement serve? In a lot of ways, this could be the cornerstone of your application materials. It's a personal introduction that gives admission committees the answers to 3 very important questions. First one is why you want to pursue graduate study. The second one is why have you chosen your intended field? And the third one is why do you believe this program is the best fit for you to achieve your goals? So no matter how those prompts are packaged, it really does come down to answering those 3 questions in one way or another. And to be honest, not every single prompt will ask you to hit upon all of these, but most of them will. So the statement of purpose, the personal statement, they are giving you a chance to introduce yourself to people who you will work very closely with over the next X number of years, depending on if you're looking at a PhD program or a master's program. For schools that don't have an interview process, this could be the element that really compels admissions to want to learn more about you. Right? So this is how you're sort of introducing who you are and creating curiosity about who you are. So they want to find out a little bit more about that journey and whether or not, they kind of dig in to see if your goals and your experience align with what they're looking for. It is very different from numerical data like your GPA, your GRE, your GMAT scores, and all the things that you're going to list on your CV and resume, which just give you a really quick snapshot of where you've been and ideally sort of the numbers that you've gained as you've worked through and taken tests and earned your different grades in different classes. Like you can't really go back and change those things. So because you can't change those things, and to some degree you can't really change the experience that you've had in your resumes, The essay is the only place where you have control over the input. So it's a chance to tell a story about yourself and create interest in who you are and what you want to do, and that you have interests and abilities that are in common with current and future students. So there's a lot writing on these essays. And with that, we're going to go ahead and give you guys a chance to start asking us some questions. You can send them to Q&A, you can put them in chat, but Kelsey's there to help you out. She will pass them on to me. If you guys don't have any questions, we can kind of carry on, but we want to make sure that we allow time to hear from you guys.
Oh, okay. We got one question so far. How
All
long should
right.
you take to write these essays?
Ooh, that's a really great question. I feel like we get that question often. There's no one perfect answer for how long this is going to take. It really depends on the individual who's writing these essays, but rule of thumb, I would say these essays are going to take quite a bit more time than you think, because the drafting process is lengthy. You're certainly probably not going to feel like your first draft is submission ready. You'll want to find other people to read it and get other opinions. You'll make changes as you work through however many drafts. Typically it's about 4 until it's submission ready. But I would say that you should anticipate and allow for at least 6 months. And I think Kelsey can vouch for that as well. I can't remember her timeline, but I think that was similar.
Yeah, I started the summer before. All of my deadlines were December 1st. And so I started in the summer. I started working on the GRE stuff. I started working on the essays, getting my CV all put together. I kind of started working on all of these at the same time. But the essays definitely did take a lot longer than I was expecting. And Lene, you were completely right. You definitely want to get other eyes on it, because once I did, I felt like my essays were exactly where I wanted them to be, getting a lot more input from everybody else on those. So give yourself quite a bit of time if you have it available. All right, so I think this one's referring to the SOP, but maybe not. We'll just go with it. How specific should you address the program of interest, and do you mention faculty members?
You would probably mention faculty members if you are pursuing a PhD, because you're going to indicate your research interests and whose research has either inspired you or who you want to work with. So that's very typical and very common when you're writing an SOP for a PhD program. That can also be the case when you are applying to a research heavy master's degree program. So you'd want to specifically call out why it is that you want to be at that institution, and in particular, who you are interested in working with, because their research is aligned with what you are also intending to pursue. No matter what, you want to be as detailed as possible. These essays are very much a show over tell activity. So you want to give the details and the specifics in terms of addressing the program. That's a great question. You want to make sure that you indicate in your writing that you've done your research, that you are an expert about what that program has to offer, and you don't repeat details back to them that they would tell the world in terms of marketing why they're a good program. You need to put a spin on it that shows you've done your research, and you can specifically describe why it is the elements or the features of that program are best suited to help you get where you want to go. So you really have to talk about not why that school is the best fit for applicants, but why that school is the best fit for you based on your specific goals.
All right. How about a formal cover letter that asks for placement in the MBA? What should be written in that?
A formal cover letter asking for placement in, that sounds like it would be similar to, that's actually a really good one. I'm not sure about a formal cover letter as it would relate to placement in a program. It would be very similar to what a lot of MBA essays are, which are kind of a hybrid of a statement of purpose and a personal statement. So you would want that to include the features of a cover letter that typically are sought after. So you'd want to talk about experience that's made you a good fit, and then your interest in that program as well. That's one of those that I don't want to weigh in too heavily on, because I would feel like I would need to see the directions for that or what they're asking for to get a better sense of what they would, why they would ask for it in a cover letter format, if that makes sense. I don't know if Kelsey, if you have any ideas on that one, but some of these I think I would need to see what it is they're asking of you before I feel confident giving you like a very solid answer.
Yeah, that one's a tough one. I haven't seen that one before. All right, I've got quite a few people asking what's the difference between kind of a mediocre personal statement or SOP and an outstanding personal statement or SOP.
The outstanding ones are really detail heavy, and their organization is on point. So all those high level issues, development flow, subjects, all of those things are high and tight. And then the way that it is communicated is so that there's not really anything left to question. You provide enough details so that the admissions committees who are reading through that really have a solid sense of who you are, what you've done, what you want to do, and why you want to do it in their program. So it's really just having the specificity that helps you be separated out from everyone else. So you really want to avoid anything that feels too general, anything that any applicant applying would maybe say. That's the kind of thing that doesn't help you come across as your own unique personality. So you're looking for the ability to share your experiences, but in a way that hints at how you're bringing sort of your unique spin on the way you've arrived at this juncture in your life, and how that's different from other people. So it's really just a matter of, again, kind of going back to show versus tell, but also making sure that you, again, can demonstrate that you've done your research and you are speaking to things that you know will be strengths for that program.
So we got some questions that are asking kind of along the lines of, can we use these essays as a space to explain or make up for some things that may be showing up on our transcript or maybe showing up in our resume or CV? Can this be a space to sort of explain some of those things that are coming up that may not look as good to admissions?
It can be a space for that. It's important that you don't dwell on something that was maybe just you needed to quickly kind of explain that you've faced challenges, but you came through them and you built skills and ability to not face those challenges again. So if you're going to share that kind of story, it's really to show that you have come through it and would not be subject to that again. I don't necessarily think that unless it's something you really feel you have to explain, if all the other things that you've done kind of outshine maybe a negative in your past, I wouldn't necessarily even include that negative. If all the positives really show that you are ready for this program, there can be other space in the application materials as well. So we'll look out for supplementals that might ask for that kind of thing. That really is sort of an individual decision. I would typically advise students to not necessarily address that unless it's something they really feel like they have to address, mostly because you're limited in the space and character count. So you want to make sure that you are focused more on your strengths and what you're going to bring to the program versus maybe something that demonstrates that you weren't always on your A game. I don't know, Kelsey, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think this is, I agree with you completely. I don't know if you want to spend as much time on justifying your weaknesses as more highlighting your strengths and showing why you are a good fit, and let them determine if those areas are going to be a concern or not. Because if you're shining a light on things that are a concern, then it is going to be a concern, right? But letting them sort of determine that, I think, is a better strategy.
Yeah, 100%. I like how you said that. Like, don't shine a light. That doesn't necessarily that wouldn't necessarily illuminate something, right? That other people wouldn't notice.
All right, so we've got some joining from the UK who are asking about differences between the SOP and POS for those in the UK, because it looks like a lot of them ask for written essays. They don't specify an SOP or a personal statement.
Okay, if they don't specify an SOP or personal statement, then actually let's take a second and get back into some things that you guys might find helpful. Because that question comes right into some of our tips for writing the SOP and the personal statement. So especially if you are just sort of given that write an SOP without any directions, that can happen, or you're given really detailed directions, the key here is follow the directions. So with the written essays, I've worked with a number of UK applicants. The written essays, the directions usually specify what they want to see. Sometimes it's a little bit personal statement-like, sometimes it's a little bit statement of purpose-like. But the key here is no matter what, for every program you have, read the directions very carefully. The directions for your statement of purpose or personal statement could be incredibly general, or they could be incredibly specific. Whatever you're asked to deliver, you have to make sure that you deliver on those details, because a big part of this is determining your ability to follow directions, right? Like this whole application process is so many steps that you have to accomplish, and you have to do it in the way the schools have asked you to do it. The prompt for the essay falls under that same category. They have a number of things that they're asking you. They expect that you address each of those things. When your essay is complete, one of the things you want to check is you want to check that you're able to kind of go, okay, I know that they asked me to provide why this school is my choice. So you would need to be able to articulate the link between what you've written and what you've been asked to write. You can say, okay, I know I've answered this question because I answered it by doing this. So here are some very different examples, but this is the kind of thing you'll run into. Some of you will have prompts that are all kind of similar. Some of you will have prompts that are kind of run the gamut of what prompts can look like. First example, you won't even be able to really see this. It should be really small, but this is an example of an incredibly specific prompt. It is asking you to include all the things, and not only that, but how they expect to see it as well. So you can have something like this that is this detailed, or you might have something like example 2. That's pretty common. I'd say example number 2 is really similar to most of the prompts that I'm familiar with, but you'll also end up with something like example 3, write a statement composed in your own words, that's key, describing your career plans and the reasons you wish to pursue graduate study. Super general, but that's where you can kind of rely on those 3 questions that we talked about, why grad school? And I always like to include why now. So why graduate school and why now? Why the field that you're choosing and why this program. So when you have something that's really broad like this, you can sort of rely on those 3 questions to provide you with guardrails. But you can also, if you have different kinds of prompts, if you have something like prompt number 3, there's no reason why you can't use the essay you wrote for prompt 2. Right? Prompt 2 gives you a little bit more guidance, a little more directions. You can use that to help you figure out what you need to write for these more generally phrased prompts. But bottom line, the prompt directions are way more important than the title they're given. So if you are asked to write a personal statement, read the directions very carefully to see what that personal statement should include. Same thing, if you're asked to write a SOP, make sure you read the directions really carefully to ensure that you are writing the SOP that they want to see from you. So with the written essays, it's going to be either generally phrased or it'll be more specific, but that's where you just rely on the directions that the admissions committee have used to build their prompts. We can get into some more questions.
Okay, let's jump into how important is the SOP or personal statement in compared to all of your other materials, like your transcripts, your letter of recommendations, those kind of things.
I would say that it is probably one of the most important things. So the other things can certainly be prohibitive. If you don't have the GPA or test scores that will kind of make the cut and have your application be considered, like those can be sort of limiting factors. But if your application is being considered, then the essay is hugely important because the essay is your personal introduction. It's what you're sharing with them so they get a sense of who you are, why you want to do what you want to do. And through that, they're going to make a determination about whether or not you are going to be a good fit for their program. So for schools that don't have an interview, it's really important because this is kind of like your interview. And for schools that do have an interview, the essay or something within the essay, might be the thing that helps you get the interview, especially if there's some part that might be not necessarily what they're typically looking for. I have a great story. One of my friends was applying for an MBA program at Oxford. Her GMAT score, not stellar, and she was concerned about that. Just the quant side. So applying to an MBA program, but very low quant score. Everything else altogether, though, she ended up getting an interview. And at the interview, they told her, we typically wouldn't offer an interview to anyone who had a quant score that is as low as yours. It's atypical for us. However, we were so impressed with your essays and we were so impressed with the other work that you were able to show us. The verbal score was pretty strong. Her essay was really strong. But they were like, primarily, your journey to want to get an MBA was very interesting, and what you've done is very interesting, and that's why you're sitting here. So the essay can sometimes be a factor that helps make up for other elements that might not be quite where you need them to be for certain programs. So I think that you cannot ever underestimate how important the essays are. And I would say that they're probably the most important element for a lot of people, depending on the program.
And I just want to echo what you said earlier, Lene. This is your one opportunity to actually speak to the admissions committee. All of your other resources are not your voice at all. It is just numbers. It is just ticking boxes. This is your one opportunity to speak to them and actually make your case for why you deserve to be there. And that is critical. All right. So we've got a couple questions that are asking kind of how much you should address how you would benefit the department as opposed to how the program sort of benefits you in those SOPs and personal statements.
That's a really good question. I'm not sure to what extent it would be difficult to put a spin on it to show like why it is they need you there. So I really think that you want to focus more on why the department is a good fit for you. So what do they have that's going to benefit you in your journey? How is the people you're going to work with, the research they're focused on, how will those things contribute to development so that you can reach whatever you're aspiring to? So I really think that spend needs to be on what they have that you're going to make use of, and not so much what you're bringing to them in a way that will be beneficial. Kelsey, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I don't think I have anything further. I think you nailed it. That's exactly what the advice I would give as well. So. All right, let's see here. Oh, we've got centralized application programs. So if you're applying for something that isn't school specific, you're just putting it into an application program and it sort of sends that out to different schools. How would you go about writing those essays?
We've had a lot of students come through our program who were looking to become physician's assistants. So we actually have quite a bit of experience with that. The why this program question or why this school question, that question is going to be set aside. So you definitely are not going to address that when you have that centralized application. Instead, you're really going to focus on why it is that you have decided this is going to be more like a personal statement. It's going to be what's motivating you to take this step in your career, or why is it that you want to join this field? So it's really going to be about your experiences and motivations for wanting to pursue whatever career the centralized application is compiling everyone's information for. So for the most part, it's still very much focused on kind of the why grad school, why now, except it's not necessarily grad school. It might be like why physical therapy, why now, or why position systems, why now, and then also why the field. So you'll just spend more time developing those 2/3 of the questions we talked about earlier, and not really any time at all developing that last point, why this program, because there won't be any specifics about the program. And it'll be much more focused on that personal journey.
All right. So we've got a couple people asking about diversity statements, how some programs are requiring a separate diversity statement from the personal statement or SOP, and how you tackle that. And then an additional piece of that is if they don't have those separate things, should you include some of those diversity statement ideas in your personal statement?
That's a great question. I think even if you have to write a diversity statement for just one program, that's a great place for you to kind of think about ideas that would fit an SOP or personal statement that doesn't necessarily, that's not necessarily asking you to describe the same things you described in the diversity statement, but it can be a great jumping off point for you to come up with ideas that would contribute well to your SOP or personal statements for other programs. In terms of tackling diversity statements, it's really about showing how it is that you bring your unique personality and your unique experiences, whether they might be, to that campus in a way that shows that you are not going to quite be like everyone else. And so it's really hard for me to say exactly what that would look like for each individual person, because diversity is one of those terms that's hard to define without kind of having the context for it. So it would really be sort of your individual experience with that and how you're able to share it. But I do think that writing the diversity statement can help you tap into ideas that you'll then want to migrate over to your personal statement or statement of purpose for programs that didn't necessarily ask for a diversity statement. That's how I would go about that. Kelsey, what do you think in terms of approaching it and then being able to use it, translating it over to your other essays?
Yeah, and if you think about usually the purpose of the diversity statement, kind of what you were talking about there, is to show how you're different from the other applicants. That is something that you would want to show in your personal statement as well, is how what you bring to the table. Because when they're looking at applications, they want to bring in people who are going to bring in something different to their program, not the same thing that they've been having. Because when you have diversity, that's where you have challenging of ideas, and that's where you have growth. And so that's what they're going to be looking for. So bringing those ideas into that and keeping in mind, if you're writing a diversity statement, that's kind of their goal with admitting different types of candidates. That's kind of want to be your focus there as well. Okay, so optional essays. So you've got your personal statement or SOP, and then the university asks for optional essays on top of that. What would you do with that type of situation?
I always recommend that you do the optional essays, because if you're the only applicant who hasn't, then all people who are vying for spots in this program, well, their essays have something that your essay lacks. So I would say if the essay is optional, or whatever they offer you is optional, you should do it, because it's an opportunity to share a little bit more about yourself in some capacity, and that's a really good thing. And again, you don't want to have something missing from your application package that everyone else has.
Would you do the same with the GRE?
That's a great question. I would say a few years ago, yes, but that's really changed. That really has changed. Schools, when it's GRE optional, that used to be code for now it's not optional. You should still do it because everyone else is. But that has changed, and optional now truly does mean optional, because so many people are not submitting scores and not taking standardized tests. That's really kind of up to you, but I can tell you that my recommendation has changed. And I would tell people that, if you have scores and you're feeling good about them, go ahead and submit them. If you have scores and you're not feeling good about them, don't submit them.
Does the SOP or the personal statement help you get better opportunities during the program or after graduation, like research assistantship roles or fellowships or anything like that?
That would be something that you would want to kind of dig into. It wouldn't be after admission. It would be part of sort of, well, I guess if you mean they've decided to take you on and then they're deciding how they're going to allocate different resources or funding or whatnot. A lot of that is going to be program specific. So you'd really have to dig in and see how it is that your programs use all the elements of the application package, especially for the research fellowship. There might be something in there that really sparks interest in a professor. So I would say that that could be helpful, but that would depend very much on the program and how they use the different facets of your application package. So that's just something that, again, not necessarily one answer for, but those are great questions. And I highly encourage you to reach out to those different departments to see exactly how it is that they factor in each and every element of their application.
So for those of us who are coming from the workforce instead of coming in from academics, what advice would you have when you don't have a whole lot of research in your background to writing those SOPs?
That is a great question. And we actually have that question all the time. One thing is to not sort of silo your experience, thinking that only, the only thing that's going to look great if you were looking at something that's research heavy is work that you did in undergrad that was very research focused. You want to think really expansively about the skills and abilities that you have developed in your career, because a lot of those will translate to skills and abilities that you need to perform at the graduate level or perform work at the graduate level. So a lot of it is how you spin your experience to show like, okay, this might not have happened in the lab, but I have had, I've had to build teams, I've had to work the deadlines, I've had to work with really sensitive data in other capacities. All of that is going to translate. So it's really about you showing how that experience is relevant to what you want to do, and not necessarily thinking that it's not going to fit just because it didn't happen in sort of maybe the perfect idealized context. So it's really about expanding what you've done, or thinking more expansively about what you've done and how it is that everything you've done up until this point really probably has helped you grow and develop in some way. And if it's in a way that's going to help you be prepared for graduate school, then that is something that would belong in your essay, because it's showing that you are ready for this level of research or study.
So Lene, if I'm writing to a lot of different schools, because hopefully I'm applying to more than just one school, right? Hopefully I'm applying to a couple different ones. Do I have to write an essay for every single school, like a unique essay? And if so, like how much time should I spend on that?
I sincerely hope not. No, that is usually not what you have to do, because if you think about it, why you want to go to graduate school and why you want to study this field, those things aren't going to change. Those parts of your story are going to be the same no matter where you apply. So depending on the prompts, and they're usually pretty similar, you'll be able to just evolve your essays, or some essays you could literally copy and paste. That's the best case scenario. Others you'll have to tweak a little bit to make sure that they align with different prompts, but a lot of what you're sharing is not going to change. Your experiences aren't going to change. Why you want to do this is not going to change. The one thing you have to remember is the why this school paragraph is going to change if you then have to write one of those. So a lot of people who are applying to a number of different programs will sort of have mocked up an essay that explains, for the most part, the why graduate school and why this program elements, and they use that and tweak it for each individual prompt. And then the only thing they have to write each time that is unique is anything relating to why that program is best fit. So no, for the most part, unless the prompts are crazy different, and they usually aren't, you should not have to write unique essays for each program you're applying to. But, crazy things happen, and maybe you are an applicant and you're applying to programs that have very different prompts. If that's the situation, you'll still probably be able to borrow ideas, but the way you develop them might be significantly different. And again, that would be pretty rare. So nope, you usually have sort of a few ideas that kind of rule them all, and you're able to use those ideas in many, many different essays.
Another question. It says personal statement. How personal should I get with that statement? And should I bring in things from my CV in there too? Like, how should I handle that?
That is a great question. How personal you want to get really is sort of up to you. It's hard to answer that question without seeing an example of just how personal you mean. For the most part, you are going to pick experiences that have led you up to this point. So you want experiences that are relevant to why you want to go to graduate school. So you want to be personal in that regard. Like if you had a particular experience that really turned you onto this field, or if you worked with a certain group of people that really opened your eyes to opportunities that you decided to pursue further, you're going to share these details. But how personal, that really depends on whether or not the personal elements you're sharing serve the purpose of showing that you are ready and are good fit for graduate school. So always come back to that. Like, is this serving the purpose of what this essay should be doing, which is showing that I'm ready for grad school and that I've gone through these experiences and I can show that I've developed an interest and I want to pursue that interest. So that's what I would be careful of in terms of personal information. You don't have to reveal too much about yourself, really, especially anything that doesn't, again, serve that purpose. Now, in terms of the CV, you want to think about the CV and the resume working with your essays. So ideally, they're sharing different information. However, that CV and the resume, when you're building that, that is going to be, a wellspring of ideas, because as you go through and you start thinking about the jobs you've had, you'll think about people you worked with, you'll think about these other experiences that you've had, or things that you learned, or challenges that you faced during those moments in your employment history. And those are stories that go beyond what's being communicated in the CV. So I would say try to make sure your essay does not just repeat your CV with a few more details. Try to think of it as something that provides a space for you to give further information about yourself. But if there is something from your CV and a job experience that you've had, and in writing your CV, you realize that there's a whole backstory here to your time in this in whatever career that was, that might be something you'd want to develop further for your personal statement. In terms of working together, how do you feel about that, Kelsey? Like repeating information, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I wouldn't repeat it because it's there, right? You captured it already. It's part of your application. It's done. And again, this space for your personal statement, your SOP is so precious because like I said earlier, this is the only time you get to talk to the admissions committee. So I would not waste a single second just rehashing my CV. I would want to make sure that I capture what is so significant in my journey that led me to this moment, to applying for this program at this university at this moment in my life. Why am I here? And I wouldn't just try to rehash what my other application materials cover, because I don't want to lose any of that precious space.
Awesome. We had some questions about, how to really go about tackling this. And that's actually aligns with kind of our second tip. So I'm going to share that with you guys. And that second tip is to be yourself. Absolutely, because admissions committees are professional lie detectors. And even just something that's a little bit disingenuous, they can sniff that out instantly. So in terms of this, you want to write the SOP or personal statement that really truly does represent who you are and not ever who you think admissions wants you to be, because all of us have ideas about what admissions committees want, And I can guarantee you those ideas are all pretty much the same. So then when we write those essays trying to meet what we think is their criteria, we end up all sounding kind of generic and the same. And try to stay away from that idea. Pretend you cannot at all fathom what they want and just try to be your most authentic self, right? The essays are asking for this sincere representation of who you are. So you really want to do that. And as Kelsey said, this is a precious space. This is the only space where you actually get to do that throughout the entire, well, basically everything else is checkboxes. This is where you get to elaborate a little bit on who you are in the world and how you see yourself functioning within that space. Essays that are written with what they want in mind, they tend to skip over really great, unique experiences. And those are the things that are going to help admissions get a sense of who we are and how we bring diversity in whatever way we're kind of thinking about that word to the program. Also, essays that are written for the audience, they do tend to be full of general statements, and those general statements are boring for readers, and they're also not always that believable because they come across as something that sounds like you want me to think this about you, if that makes sense. And again, the takeaway here is that admissions committees are human lie detectors. This is what they do. They go through these essays, and anything that starts to feel a little bit forced, they are going to see that immediately. So in terms of people who are asking how to make your essay stand out, this is how you do it. You are just as true as you possibly can be to the journey that is taking you to this point. Along with that, I'm going to go ahead and share another tip with you guys, because it kind of comes along with what we were talking about in terms of how to pick and choose what to write and thinking about all of your experience as being experience you want to consider. You can probably figure out what's going to come based on the little brain and all the light bulbs at the bottom. But the third tip here is brainstorming, but it's brainstorming in a way that will help you whether you have an open-ended prompt or a very specific set of directions. You still need details to help answer the 3 questions we've been talking about. So when you start to brainstorm, you really want to let yourself go. Don't try to edit or limit yourself, especially in the very beginning of the process. So for the initial stages, think as generally as possible. Really dig in and think about, even if something seems like it wasn't that important, give it a second and think about, well, okay, that moment might not have seemed very important, but did it lead you to something that was? There's always time to refine later. So you want to get as many ideas down as you possibly can. But here are some useful topics for consideration. So if you're beginning to think along the lines of what should go in these essays, think about personal motivations for this career path or for this research path. Anything in the past, in the present, in the future, what is personally motivating you to want to pursue graduate study in this field? Try to articulate what excites you about your field of study. Is there anything that you can relate that shows that you sort of had this moment where you fell in love with it? Have you had any major accomplishments while involved in study or elsewhere that just shows dedication, shows passion, shows that you're committed to something, you're a hard worker, you work well with others? Major accomplishments can be many, many things. They don't always have to be academically related. Think about what you've done professionally and any qualifications you have. And again, that can be really broad. Qualifications can be that you are an amazing project manager and you have experience and can show the details that indicate why you're an amazing project manager. You're a highly organized individual who's super detail oriented. If you can show that through experiences and your professional background, that's awesome. That's stuff that might go in your essay. It might not, but this is how you just start thinking through these different experiences. And then, in terms of the programs, kind of have a list going of what you like about those programs. What have you researched that appeals to you? And in particular, how has it appealed to you in a way that's relevant to that program being best fit for you? So those are some great places just to start this whole process. And now we're going to bounce back to some more questions because I know that you guys still have a few. And we are getting close to time.
Yeah, so going back to talking about how we kind of be yourself, set yourself apart. You don't want admissions committee to get bored with your writing. I've had a lot of people here asking about the intro. How can I start my personal statement or SOP so that it's not just conventional, everyday, everybody's similar sort of writing style? How can I kind of make that first impression right out the gate with my SOP or personal statement?
So first of all, you don't have to do that. And sometimes you really can't because of the parameters of the prompts. Your introduction should really just be telegraphing what's to come. So your introduction for these types of essays, for the most part, they tend to be really short. You want to give the reader a general sense of what you are going to share with them in the body paragraphs that follow, that detail everything in a little bit greater capacity. So don't, if you're a great creative writer and you're great at writing hooks, that's awesome. That might be something that's beneficial, but that's not something that you need to stress about too much in terms of like the make it or break it with your essay. They're much more interested in the substantive stuff that's going to be in those body paragraphs, where they really get into your experience and your desires and the passion that you have around this field. The introduction is just there to sort of set them up for those details that are to follow. So you want to just make sure that your introduction is giving them a map of the details. And one way to think about this is that you don't want to bring up something in your introduction that you don't touch upon in your essay. That's a major flaw in terms of how the introduction functions. Your introduction needs to be aligned with what's going to be in your essay, and it also needs to just spark interest in certain things. So to be honest, not every member of an admissions committee is going to read all of your essay, but what they might see is in the introduction, you did some really interesting research, and then they're going to scan and find where you detail that research. And that might be like down in the third paragraph, but they're like, hey, here, third paragraph. That is what I want to read about because I want to know more about the research this person did, which was generally mentioned in the introduction.
How much should we balance the being concise versus using every inch of that space as much as possible?
You're going to have moments that you will probably feel that you have to cut something that you really don't want to cut, especially if you have a word limit that is not enabling you to be as verbose as you'd like to be. So think about everything again. You want to have the right level of detail to show the experience and to show whoever's reading this sort of the journey that you've traveled through. So I can't necessarily give you a specific answer for that. A lot of it will depend on what your word counts are. Some of you will be able to provide more detail than others. But when you start to realize that you're running out of room, you'll need to cut anything that, you might need to cut some of those adjectives out and just really focus on kind of directly communicating something in a more very quickly from point A to B way without a lot of the flourishes that, especially if you like writing, you would want to add. But remember this, if you have a short word count, that's pretty much admissions committee saying that they want you to give them the details and give them the details in a to the point way versus allowing you to creatively write a long narrative that could go on for 4, 5, 6, 7 pages. A shorter word count is basically saying, we want to hear the facts and the details, give them to us. What do you think, Kelsey? How do you feel about that sort of making those tough decisions and then deciding like, okay, well, you probably can't be as descriptive as possible, but you still have to be just descriptive enough to share how that experience aligns with your goals?
Yeah, that's a hard balance. And I feel like it's something that's so personal because you have to decide what is going to fit, what you got to cut and what you can't. I try to rewrite my sentences and paragraphs as much as possible to see if I can get them shorter and more direct and to the point. That's a good strategy for revision to try and get as much as you can in that space that you have. But some things got to go and you got to decide, how can I say this in a way that makes sense now? And then if I need to elaborate in an interview or a little bit later, I can.
We are going to take a second. We'll get back and answer any questions we can, but I want to make sure that we share with you how Magoosh can help, because all of us on this team sincerely believe that you belong in graduate school. And we know that it's a tough journey and everyone is on a different journey, but ultimately you get kind of the same the same sort of educational trajectory. So right now, what we have is we have core curriculum that's built around anything and everything involved in the admissions process. So we've got building your grad school profile, sort of how to take those big picture things and boil them down a little bit, your GPA and planning for tests, so how to incorporate those, the number things into the process, letters of recommendations and CVs, how to build them, how to ask for them, how to follow up, grad school funding, and sort of that whole large nebulous field. And then we also have classes that focus specifically on the essays related to today's topic. So we have writing your essays, sort of a general idea of how to approach it, then brainstorming and outlining, which is a huge part of being able to choose what should go in these essays, writing your introductions, and then finally writing effective body paragraphs. So how we're offering this now is right here. So for foundations, it's 24, and there's more because there are more added all the time. Self-paced videos, which you have access to those videos for 2 years. We know that help with essays is a huge part of this. So we also have foundations and review, and that includes detailed writing feedback. So you sort of get everything that you get with foundations, but you also get the 2 writing reviews. And then the foundations plus workshop, that's where you have more of a hands-on writing guide to help you. And that includes 4 writing workshops as well. So that's foundations and review and foundations and workshops. Those are where you're going to actually see a little bit more guidance when it comes to the written portion of your application. If you have any questions about that, you can always hit the QR code at the bottom of the screen, but there's also Magoosh with the dot between the O and the SH /admissions. That'll give you more information. And you can also, if you have questions about any of these offerings, reach out to help@magoosh.com for more information. And with that, I just want to give the rest of this time to you guys for questions. We got time for a couple more at least.
Yeah, we got this. So SOP personal statement, how much should we brag and how much should we be humble? How do you kind of make that balance work?
Okay, yeah, that's a great question. Because you are your own best advocate. You want to talk highly about the things that you've done, the things that you're proud of, because it's helped you grow and develop. So if you've done some awesome things, it's completely fine to describe the awesomeness involved in the thing and then just how it's made you awesome. All of that is appropriate. But again, think about it in terms of relevancy. So I can't imagine sharing something like that being more than a sentence or 2. And if you start to really feel like you are focused more on yourself and the great things that you've done, and you're not necessarily focused on how those things have made you a better person or built skills, that's where I'd find that balance. So not so much the outcome, which was that you are now awesome, but more about the journey, how you grew and developed. That if you focus on that more, then you're less likely to stumble into the bragging category, and that'll remain more sort of in the humble bragging category. I don't know. What do you think, Kelsey?
I mean, this is an opportunity for you to sort of show off a little bit and sell yourself, but you also don't want to come across a little bit as arrogant as well. So that's kind of a big balance there. But I like that the humble brag, right, is showing what you've done in a way that you've shown how it impacted you and how it made you better and whatnot. That's a great way to do that.
Yeah, I think if you package it as a humble brag, you'll probably be within, you'll have the right balance.
Mm-hmm. All right. When it comes to reviewing our SOPs, who should we go to? Should we have like an external consultant look over our essays and give us feedback? Should we go through Magoosh? Should we just have our mom look at it? Who should we talk to kind of give us some feedback on our writing?
Probably definitely not your mom or family members, just because they're so biased. Like they're usually biased. I mean, you might have a mom out there who's a writing coach who's able to set aside the fact that you are her offspring. Then that situation, sure, your mom. But for the most part, you can go with a consultant. You can go with Magoosh. I mean, we have a lot of experience working through these essays. It needs to be someone that you trust, someone who can be objective, right? So someone who's not biased, someone who doesn't isn't so much isn't so in your corner that they're afraid to tell you when something has to go or something is awkward or something just doesn't fit right. So it has to be someone you trust, but also someone that you know will be honest with you about areas that need to be improved. And I can't tell you the right place to go for that. There are so many different places you can. So that's what I would say. Like, make sure it is someone that you trust and that you trust to be honest. That is a great question, honestly, to wrap this up. What do you think,
Yeah,
Kelsey?
I think so. Like, that's great.
Awesome. You guys, thank you so very much for your time. We want to be respectful of the hour. We are at time. Your questions were awesome. We will have more of these webinars and more of the ask me anything kind of format. So, keep your eye open for more opportunities, because we definitely didn't get to everyone's questions today. But thank you guys so very much. I hope this was helpful. And yeah, hopefully we'll see you again. Our paths may cross again in Magoosh at some point, which would be awesome. But for now, you guys take care. Have a great rest of whatever part of the day you happen to be in. And thanks so much.
Thanks, guys.